Welcome to Classic Storytime Hub. Tonight, we bring you a reimagined retelling of Edgar Allan Poe's chilling tale, The Facts in the Case of M. Valdemar. This is not a simple reading, but a newly crafted version, reshaped to grip you with suspense and horror like never before.
I cannot feign surprise that the strange affair of Monsieur Valdemar has stirred such restless whispers. Truly, it would have been astonishing had it not, given the dreadful circumstances. Despite our efforts to keep the matter cloaked in secrecy, distorted rumors slipped into society, breeding wild exaggerations, disbelief, and no small measure of unease. It has therefore become necessary that I set down the facts as I myself witnessed them. For 3 years, my studies had circled obsessively around the mysteries of mesmerism. Then, some 9 months passed, a startling thought seized me. In all the experiments conducted thus far, no one had dared attempt the mesmeric trance at the very threshold of death. Could the dying still respond to the magnetic influence? Would their condition weaken or heighten its effects? And most pressing of all, might the advance of death itself be delayed, even for a moment, by such an intervention? The implications were staggering, and my curiosity irresistible. In seeking a subject, my thoughts turned to my acquaintance, Monsieur Ernest Valdemar, scholar, translator, and a man whose frail body and nervous temperament made him unusually receptive to mesmeric influence. His appearance was striking, a frame gaunt to the point of spectral, whiskers white as snow, clashing violently with hair so black it was often mistaken for a wig. His health had long been in decline. His physicians had pronounced his illness incurable, yet he spoke of his approaching end with a calm detachment, as though death were not a terror, but an inevitability. On several occasions I had placed him into mesmeric sleep with little resistance, though never with the results I had hoped for. His will remained stubbornly his own, and clairvoyant visions eluded him. I attributed these failures to his failing health. Still, it was precisely this condition, his slow march toward dissolution, that made him the perfect subject for the experiment I had long contemplated.
When the idea first struck me, it seemed inevitable that I should turn to Monsieur Valdemar. His calm, almost stoic philosophy left me certain he would not object, and with no family in America to interfere, the path was clear. I spoke to him openly, and, much to my astonishment, he received the proposal with a spark of genuine interest. Though he had long submitted to my experiments, never before had he shown such sympathy for my pursuits. His illness was of that dreadful kind which allowed physicians to predict, with unnerving precision, the very hour of his death. And so we agreed. He would summon me a full day before the moment his doctors had marked as his end. 7 months have passed since I received his note. It read, in a hand already trembling with weakness, "My dear P., you may as well come now. D and F are agreed that I cannot last beyond tomorrow midnight, and I believe they are correct. Valdemar." Within half an hour of its writing, the message was in my hands. 15 minutes later, I stood in the chamber of the dying man. The sight that met me was ghastly. In the 10 days since I had last seen him, his decline had been catastrophic. His face had taken on a leaden pallor, his eyes were dull and lifeless, and his body had wasted to such an extent that the bones of his cheeks had broken through the skin. His breathing was ragged, his pulse scarcely detectable, and yet, astonishingly, his mind remained sharp, his voice clear, his hand steady enough to jot notes in a small book as I entered. He sat propped against pillows, attended by doctors D and F. After greeting him, I drew the physicians aside, and they gave me a grim account of his condition. One lung had long since hardened into useless cartilage. The other was riddled with decay, its tissue collapsing into a mass of corruption. Perforations had formed, adhesions bound it to the ribs, and the disease had advanced with terrifying speed. They suspected even his heart was compromised, though the damage to his lungs made certainty impossible. Their conclusion was unanimous. Valdemar would not survive beyond midnight on Sunday. At that moment, the clock marked 7 on Saturday evening.
After the physicians had taken their leave, believing they had bid Valdemar their final farewell, I remained by his side. They promised, at my urging, to return the following night, though it was clear they expected to find him already gone. When we were alone, I spoke openly with Valdemar about the nearness of his death, and more urgently about the experiment itself. To my astonishment, he not only consented, but pressed me to begin at once. His eagerness was unsettling, as though he clung to this strange hope more than to life itself. 2 nurses hovered in the room, but I dared not proceed with so grave a task before such unreliable witnesses. I delayed until the following evening, when fortune brought me the presence of a medical student I knew, Mr. Theodore L.L. His arrival gave me the confidence to proceed, for Valdemar was fading swiftly, and I feared that hesitation would rob me of the chance entirely. Mr. L.L. agreed to record every detail of what transpired, and it is from his notes that much of this account is drawn. At 5 minutes before 8, I clasped Valdemar's frail hand and asked him, in the presence of the student, to declare whether he was fully willing to undergo the mesmeric experiment in his present condition. His voice was faint, yet clear enough. "Yes, I wish it, though I fear you have delayed too long." Even as he spoke, I began the familiar passes of my hand across his brow. At once, I saw the first signs of influence take hold. Yet, despite all my effort, no further change appeared until hours later, just after 10 o'clock, when Doctors D and F returned as promised. I explained my intention. They raised no objection, remarking only that the patient was already in the very throes of death. With their tacit approval, I altered my technique, abandoning the lateral motions for downward strokes, fixing my gaze into the dim, glassy eye of the sufferer. By then, his pulse had vanished entirely. His breathing came in dreadful, rattling gasps, each one separated by half a minute of silence, as though death itself were pausing to watch.
For nearly 15 minutes, nothing changed. Then, without warning, a long, shuddering sigh escaped Valdemar's chest. The dreadful, rattling breath that had haunted the room fell silent, though the pauses between each faint inhalation remained. His limbs were already cold as ice. At 5 minutes before 11, I saw it, the unmistakable mark of mesmeric influence. The dull, glassy stare shifted into that strange inward look, an expression seen only in those caught between waking and sleep. With a few swift passes of my hand, his eyelids trembled, then closed entirely. Still unsatisfied, I pressed on, pouring every ounce of will into the motions until his body stiffened into a rigid calm. I arranged him carefully, legs stretched straight, arms resting at his sides, head slightly raised. By the time I finished, the clock struck midnight. I invited the gentlemen present to examine him. Their verdict was unanimous. Valdemar had entered a trance more perfect than any they had ever witnessed. Fascination overcame them. Dr. D resolved to remain through the night, while Dr. F departed, promising to return at dawn. The student, Mr. L.L., and the nurses stayed with me. We left the patient untouched until 3 in the morning. When I approached again, I found him exactly as before, pulse absent, breath so faint it could only be detected by a mirror held to his lips, eyes closed naturally, limbs cold and rigid as marble. And yet he did not look dead. On impulse, I attempted a small experiment. I moved my hand gently above his right arm, scarcely expecting a response. To my astonishment, the arm stirred, weakly but obediently, following the path I traced in the air. The sight chilled me. Emboldened, I resolved to attempt something more daring. I would speak to him.
I leaned close and whispered, "Monsieur Valdemar, are you asleep?" At first, there was no reply. Only the faintest quiver at his lips betrayed any awareness. I repeated the question, once, twice, until, on the third attempt, his body shuddered with a faint tremor. His eyelids lifted just enough to reveal a thin, ghastly strip of white. Then, with agonizing slowness, his lips parted, and a whisper seeped out, so frail it was scarcely sound at all. "Yes, asleep now. Do not wake me. Let me die so." I touched his limbs. They were stiff as stone. Yet, as before, his right arm followed the faint motion of my hand, as though tethered to my will. I pressed further. "Do you still feel pain in your chest, Monsieur Valdemar?" The answer came at once, weaker still. "No pain. I am dying." I dared not disturb him further. Hours passed in silence until Dr. F. arrived before dawn. He was astonished to find Valdemar still clinging to existence. After testing for breath and pulse, he urged me to speak again. I asked, "Monsieur Valdemar, do you still sleep?" The minutes dragged on. His body seemed to gather what little strength remained, as though summoning words from the abyss. At last, in a voice barely audible, "Yes, still asleep, still dying." The physicians agreed he should be left undisturbed, for surely death would claim him within moments. Yet I could not resist. I repeated the question once more, and then it happened. A dreadful change swept across his face. His eyes rolled upward until only the whites showed. His skin blanched, not to the color of parchment, but to the stark pallor of paper itself. The fevered spots on his cheeks vanished in an instant, like candles snuffed by a sudden breath. His upper lip curled back, exposing teeth that had been hidden. His jaw dropped with a sickening snap, leaving his mouth gaping wide. Within, his tongue lay swollen and blackened, a grotesque spectacle. Even the seasoned physicians recoiled. For all their familiarity with death, none had ever witnessed a visage so hideous, so utterly beyond the natural order, as that which now confronted us in the figure of Monsieur Valdemar.
I must confess, at this point in the account, disbelief is inevitable. Yet I am bound to continue. All signs of life had vanished from Valdemar. We had resigned him to the care of the nurses, convinced he was gone, when suddenly a violent quiver rippled through his tongue. It trembled for nearly a minute, and then, from his gaping mouth came a sound. To call it a voice is inadequate, and to call it a sound is misleading. It was both, and neither. Harsh, hollow, fractured, yet piercingly distinct. It seemed to echo from some immeasurable depth, as though carried upward from the bowels of the earth itself, and it clung to the ear with a revolting texture, as if the very air had turned viscous. And yet There were words, clear, deliberate words. He was answering the question I had asked him earlier when I inquired if he still slept. Yes. No. I have slept. And now, I am dead. The effect was indescribable. Horror seized every soul in the room. The student, Mr. L., collapsed in a faint. The nurses fled in terror and refused to return. As for myself, I cannot hope to convey the impression left upon me. For nearly an hour, we labored in silence to revive the student, each of us too shaken to speak. Only when he stirred again did we dare turn our attention back to the dreadful figure of M. Valdemar.
Valdemar's condition remained unchanged, save for one dreadful certainty. The mirror no longer clouded with breath. An attempt to draw blood failed entirely, and his arm, once faintly responsive to my will, now lay inert. The only sign that the mesmeric hold endured was the faint, tremulous quiver of his tongue whenever I addressed him. To any voice but mine, he was utterly insensible. Thus he remained, day after day, week after week. For nearly 7 months we visited him, always finding the same ghastly tableau. The body rigid, the skin cold, the breath absent, yet not wholly dead. The nurses tended him constantly, though their faces betrayed the strain of such a vigil. At last, on Friday, we resolved to attempt what we had long dreaded, to awaken him. The decision was unanimous, though heavy with foreboding. I began the familiar passes, but for some time they produced no effect. Then, at last, a sign. The iris shifted downward, as though the eye itself were sinking. With it came a sudden, revolting discharge, a yellow fluid seeping from beneath the lids, filling the room with a stench so foul it turned the stomach. I tried again to command his arm, but it remained lifeless. Dr. F. urged me to put a question instead. Summoning my resolve, I leaned close and spoke. "Monsieur Valdemar, can you tell us what you feel now? What are your wishes?"
Suddenly, the fevered flush returned to his cheeks. His tongue writhed violently within his mouth, though the jaws and lips remained locked in their ghastly rigidity. Then, from that unmoving face, the dreadful voice erupted once more, harsh, broken, and unearthly. "For God's sake, quick, quick, put me back to sleep, or wake me! Quick, I tell you, I am dead!" The words froze my very soul. For a moment I faltered, torn between terror and duty. I tried first to restore his trance, but his will was gone, utterly beyond my reach. Desperate, I turned to awaken him fully, convinced I was on the verge of success. Everyone in the room braced themselves, expecting to see Valdemar stir back into life. But nothing could have prepared us for what followed. As I swept my hands in rapid passes, the voice burst forth again, shrieking, "Dead! Dead!" the sound tearing itself not from his lips, but from the very tongue itself. And then, in less than a minute, his body collapsed. Before our horrified eyes, Valdemar's frame shrank, crumbled, and dissolved, rotting away in an instant. Flesh, bone, and sinew gave way to corruption, until all that remained upon the bed was a vile, liquefied mass of decay,
unspeakable, revolting, and utterly beyond the endurance of human imagination.
And thus the story ended. If you liked this journey into the worlds of classic literature, do not forget to support us by subscribing so we can tell you more. And hey, if there's a classic tale you'd love to hear told in this suspenseful style, drop its name in the comments below. Your suggestion might be our next chilling adventure.